We're back with Glen Van Peski. GlenVanPeski.com is his website. He's written a book called Take Less, Do More. And Glen, I want to dive into a very tough moment for in your life, which is when you survived a plane crash and your pilot did not. You talk about it in the book, but please recount that tragedy, please, if that doesn't bother you.
Sure. Yeah, it's gotten easier over the years. So there was a group of us from Southern California that had flown up to Northern California for this leadership, kind of advanced leadership course on our ranch up there. And one of the guys had his pilot's license, so he said, I'll rent a plane and you guys can all pitch in. And we thought that would be pretty cool, flying in a private plane and living the life. So we're coming back from the seminar, and we stopped in San Francisco, had an amazing dinner at Fisherman's Wharf, and then got back to the plane and continued south. It's getting dark, and we were heading for John Wayne Airport in Orange County. And I had my pilot's license, low hours. I had like 100 hours of airtime. But, I'd been in a plane kind of in the pilot seat before, so I knew probably a little more than the other guys. And there were two fuel tanks in either wing. And when one of them went dry, I noticed him switch back to the left one, but I'd already seen him run that one dry when he switched to the right one. So I knew that this wasn't going to end well.
And he hadn't said anything to you, like saying, hey, we're running low on fuel?
No, he hadn't said anything to me, and none of the other guys knew. I just knew because,
you knew something about flying.
I was watching him. Him switch the tanks. So by now it's dark. We're over Orange County, but not close enough to John Wayne Airport to get there. So he's trying to make for the nearest airfield to put a plane now gliding with no power.
Shouldn't he have just started looking for an airport a lot longer before, like at least 20 minutes, 30 minutes before that he had to start switching tanks?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, and there's number. I mean, you always have like a 45-minute reserve, when you're doing your fuel calculations. I'm assuming that the winds aloft were worse than he calculated. I don't know why we had no fuel, and I don't know, I don't know if
there was no fuel leak.
He was hoping the gauge was wrong. No.
Okay.
There's no fuel leak that I'm aware of.
But how experienced was he as a pilot? And do you know how many hours he had behind him?
I don't know. I think he had a few hundred hours.
Okay, but not hyper experienced.
No, more experienced than me, but yeah.
But so it could have been an inexperienced issue, maybe.
I'm sure that had something to do with it. Yeah.
Okay. And so he had basically run out of fuel, and now all of a sudden you're gliding at this point. You've got nothing in the tank. You're literally gliding. And at this point, I imagine you're counting the seconds left for you to live.
Well, I didn't have a lot of time to think about that because he had handed me the Jepson, the guide, airport guide, basically, to look for the code that he could flip the transponder to and click to turn on the lights, because this was Meadowlark Field was a small private field that over the years homes had been built up around it, and they didn't want the airport lights on at night. So they were normally, it was an uncontrolled field, no tower or anything. And so normally pilots coming in would flip their transponder to the right frequency, click their mic and turn on the lights. So he's trying to get the lights turned on so he can see where he's trying to land, hands me the guide. I'm looking for the field and I'm not finding it. And, a stressful situation, we're falling out of a sky at night over a city. I had forgotten that the Jepson is divided into uncontrolled and controlled. And so I was looking in the controlled section, which was why I wasn't finding the airport. So we never did get the lights on. he still got.
And how are your other? You have other people in the plane. How are they reacting at this point?
I don't know. I don't remember. I was pretty focused. There was no screaming or anything, and he did tell us to assume the crash position. Put our heads between our knees as best we could.
But you weren't doing that because obviously you had to look it up on the book. At what point? At some point, he was losing enough altitude. Yeah, until he lost enough altitude where he can't. He knew it was hopeless. And so, do you blame yourself for not having found it? Do you think it would have changed your fate?
I don't think so. I mean, he did a good job of heading toward it anyway, and I don't know how he saw where it was. I mean, maybe it was a dark patch, patch in the middle of all the streetlights and stuff. I mean, he got us within 50 feet of the airport fence, so that's pretty close. Yeah. Would it have made a difference if he had seen a little sooner? Maybe if I'd been able to find the right thing to turn the lights on. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so then you're down with about 100 meters above the ground or less, right? And are you seeing anything, or are you already in the crash position, just looking down at your feet?
I'm already in the crash position. He narrowly missed a couple of houses, went through some eucalyptus trees that took our wings off, and then we were on the ground, right side up.
And so you didn't get to see any of that. You were just looking straight down. You just heard the crashing, and at that point,
I could hear the stall horn. Yeah,
you were thinking about Francine, I imagine, your wife, at some point, like, this is it.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna see her again. Or it just happened so fast. You were just trying to.
Yeah, it happened fast. Between I don't remember, especially thinking this could be it.
Really?
I mean, at some level, obviously, I knew that, right. But.
You thought there was still a good chance that you'll land, survive, should I say?
I don't know. I think so.
Okay. All right.
I mean, you're falling out of the air, but
because the pilot was the only person who died, if I remember correctly in the story.
Correct.
Yeah. The other two passengers in the back. You came off with how many injuries?
I had an imprint of my watch in my forehead. And I think I had a small microfracture in collarbone or something that just healed by itself.
But the other people behind you, they were okay? I mean,
so the guy in front of me, I was in the middle seat in the kind of the co-pilot seat. His seat came off the rails and smashed him into the front of the plane. So his face was severely smashed up.
And how is he today, or did you lose contact with him?
I've lost contact with him, but I mean, they put him back together pretty well. I mean, one eye was a little lower and further back than the other by the time they were done, I think. But I mean, he was basically
surprisingly. It's amazing what they can do.
Yeah.
And then the other people behind?
They were fine. One guy had some back injuries, I think. Everyone blacked out. I came to and asked, "Is everyone okay?" And it was silence. And so at that point, there was a point in time where I thought, "I'm the sole survivor of this crash." Mm-hmm. But then other people came to.
But I imagine you were just there for maybe unconscious for a minute or two.
Yeah, I think just a minute or two.
Because I mean, I imagine the responders and the ambulances and whatever came pretty quickly.
Yeah, you could hear sirens at that point. Yeah. And then the pilot, he just got basically impaled into what's it called? Not the steering gear. Yeah, the yoke. Yeah.
The yoke. Yeah. And that's how he died. Did he die? He died instantly, I imagine. Or I would imagine
we didn't.
He was unconscious.
We didn't really
when you
know. Yeah, we found out later, and then they called Francie, who's pregnant with our second son, not knowing he was going to be severely disabled at that point. But
Derek.
they called her, and Derek, and they called her and said, this is the hospital. There's been a plane crash. You need to come up and bring a friend. And we can't tell you if your husband's alive or dead or any condition. So you just need to come up here. So that was probably, plane crash is probably more stressful for her over a longer period of time than for me.
Yeah. Paradox. It is crazy. I mean, it is now. Do you have it's like a more personal question to you? Like when you look at your own, do you have a, what's it called? A like not a will, but a medical will, whether to resuscitate or not, and that kind of stuff. Have you? Because I know you went through that with Derek, your son, your second son.
Right.
And you had to like take him off life support, which has got to be horrible. I mean, my dad shot himself in the head and he didn't kill himself. His life was, his heart was beating, he was breathing when my mom found him. And so he went on life support for several days and my mom had to go through the unpleasant decision of having to turn him off. And for those who want to hear that story, go see my TED talk on that, my first TEDx talk, should I say. But I remember one person's story. She said, "Oh yeah, I don't want to be on life support. I don't want to be, like if I get bad, forget about me." And then the children got to that point where all of a sudden she, the mother, was having terminal cancer. She was going to die. Everybody knew it. She had only a few months to live. But even though she had told her all of their lives that don't do this for me, when the time came, she was just like, "No, do everything you can to keep me alive." And it's just funny how so I'm just curious, what have you learned from having to deal with Derek and maybe looking at your own life and deciding, how do you decide when to pull the plug on yourself or on somebody else?
Yeah. And I have a medical directive, but ultimately it's a judgment call in probably most areas. I think an experience that really has me thinking differently about this now is my mom. So couple years ago now, my mom decided she was losing her vision, and it was cataracts. There were like three things going on with her vision, so it wasn't easily solved. And her joys in life were gardening. She's a huge gardener, and her Sudoku. So the vision was like a big thing for her. And she lived by herself with her cat, although she recently, her cat had wandered off and not come back.
How old is she?
She decided she was, I should know this, like 88. She decided, you know what? I've had a good life. I'm calling it. Her original plan was to have a big party, invite all her friends, and eat a bunch of sugary desserts and put herself into a diabetic coma, which I was not excited about. It seemed to me like in my mind a little bit like you're having a big party and then, sorry for the imagery, because now your personal history I just found out, it's like the host takes a gun and shoots themselves like while everyone's there, because essentially that's kind of what she was doing. Thankfully, due to COVID, the big party went away and it was just family and a couple of very close friends. And it was more enjoyable than I thought. Everyone, visited, good conversation. My mom's eaten the pastries that she's been denying herself, for years and years and years. And she gets to where she feels a little woozy and she goes off to bed. And everyone kind of leaves, except for all us kids were staying there. And next morning she wakes up pretty unhappy that she's still around. And so she says, well, going to plan B. I'm stop eating and drinking. So she had, some ice chips and sips to kind of keep her throat moist, but basically stopped eating and drinking. And, 21 days later, she was gone. But
wow, that takes incredible willpower. Poof.
Yeah, I can't imagine the willpower, but it's like you say, not waiting until it gets to a point where, you're clinging to life, or you're relying on other people and asking other people to make that decision for you. Just, nope, I'm making a decision. I'm out of here. And we eventually towards the end got hospice. And so, we had some medications to kind of ease like the last portion of that. But she gutted it out, through the bulk of it.
Amazing. Wow. These are heavy stories, and you have a light book. Your book is not, but it's physically light, not that thick, but very powerful, very profound book that you've written. Take Less, Do More. It's by Glen Van Peski. It is a book not just about backpacking. Kind of like reminds me a little bit about my book, Hike Your Own Hike: 7 Life Lessons from Backpacking Across America. It's for you. You're, again, using hiking as a platform or metaphor to talk about other more profound issues. And I really appreciated it. I thought it was a fantastic book. I recommend everybody to get it, buy it, support it. All the profits are going to go to the PCT, the Pacific Crest Trail. And so just do it for that alone. You're going to help the Pacific Crest Trail continue. So Glen, thank you again for your time and for writing the book. I know how painful writing books are. And so I know this was difficult. You probably don't want to ever do this again. But let's leave you with one last story. And I think since this is kind of a dark episode, we talked about a plane crash and talked about your mom and my dad and all this other stuff, lots of death. Let's talk about you with the final story, dishwashing. You decided to become a dishwasher. And tell us quickly about that story.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought experiment for people. If you didn't need the money, you could do any job. What would you do? Because for most of us, for most of our lives, when we're looking at jobs, it's like, well, what does it pay? I gotta eat. So when I retired from that job and we moved to Bend, I would celebrate Monday mornings by going over to Sparrow Bakery, well-known local bakery here, with my Wall Street Journal and just squander a couple hours having a cup of coffee, one of their amazing ocean rolls, and reading my paper and celebrating that I wasn't at my desk.
I think you see an advertisement. I think it said dishwasher needed, and just stays there for like weeks or months, right?
Yeah. And so I finally asked him, like, hey, don't you guys need to take this sign down? I mean, how hard can it be to find a part-time dishwasher? They said, no, we've got some time. We're waiting for the right person. So eventually I thought, maybe this has my name on it. And I asked for an application, and it's a long story, but I ended up getting the job and filling in for a guy who was leaving to go to Belize for a couple months. So working Mondays, and then the kid who was doing Sundays broke his arm snowboarding. So I was doing Sundays and Mondays, and it's been a great experience. And now I just fill in kind of when they can't find someone else, basically, because it's 2 blocks from my house. So I can just walk over.
It reminds me a little bit about Jesus when he's washing somebody's feet. I mean, it's just, in other words, it's just, you don't need to do this, but it's good. It gives you a little bit of humility and reminds you to be grateful for things, and connects you with the community and connects you with all these people that you love. It's a way to give back to Sparrow, the bakery that you frequent so often, and be part of that. So I think it's a wonderful story it tells a lot about you and your character, Glen. And thank you so much for spending time. And remember, everybody get the book, Take Less, Do More, by Glen Van Peski.
Thanks, Francis. Always a pleasure. You're someone I've hiked with and
Yes.
read your books over the years, so definitely been an inspiration.